Good morning. Happy Memorial Day weekend to you all. I'm glad you decided to join us on this holiday weekend. This is a weekend that we remember and we celebrate the people who've given their lives so that we could enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy in our country. And so I hope you take the time to do that this weekend to honor those people. But every Sunday we gather together in this place, and we do so to remember the one who gave his life for us so that we could experience eternal freedom from our sin. And so I'm excited to remember that specifically with you this morning as we open our Bibles together to John chapter 8. John chapter 8 is where we are together this morning. John chapter 8. You could argue that our greatest struggle in life is battling that voice in our head that is constantly telling us that we are behind, that we are unwanted. The voice that's kind of just in the background telling you that you are unlovable if people really knew the real you, right? That no one would want you, right? It's the voice of self-condemnation that we constantly have in our minds. And so I wonder this morning, do you hear that voice in your head this morning? Did you hear that voice this morning in your head? I mean, maybe it's like really loud, you know? It's like all that you can hear. Or maybe it's a voice that's just kind of a whisper in the background. And if you experience that voice of self-condemnation, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? There are usually two general approaches to how we deal with this voice in our life. One approach that's fairly common is that we will just live our lives, and the way we live our lives is we live them to put other people down. We just live our lives trying to put other people down. And so, because if I can point out your flaws or the things that you have as a weakness or your sin, if I can put you down and go, I don't do that, then that makes me feel better about myself. It kind of elevates me to a position in my own mind that maybe I'm not that bad. Maybe things aren't as bad as that voice is telling me, right? Or the other approach that people take, if it's not that one, it's the approach where you don't put other people down, you're consistently putting yourself down. You're constantly putting yourself down. You're beating yourself up over the things that you are doing or have done in your life, and you think somehow that if you can punish yourself, feel bad enough about those things, then maybe as you are punishing yourself and beating yourself up for those things, over time you'll reach a place where you feel a little bit better about yourself again. And maybe that'll silence the voice of self-condemnation. I'm convinced that this is the number one problem that you and I struggle with in life as we seek to follow Jesus faithfully. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. I'm not just being hyperbolic saying this is the number one problem, as if every week this is the number one problem, you know? Like, I really believe this is like the number one problem that you and I battle as we seek to faithfully follow Jesus in this world. So what do you do with that condemnation? I mean, because all of us at some time or another, to varying degrees, we struggle with this fear that God has maybe not perhaps dealt fully and finally with my sin. That if I could really hear the voice of God, like audibly, if I could stand before him and hear his voice, the words that would come out of his mouth would not be words of embrace, but words of rejection, words of head-shaking disappointment. And so we read in the scriptures about this like joy that we experience when we're saved. That, oh man, we have this joy that comes from salvation. If you're a Christian, you've tasted it, right? You've tasted that joy. But it feels like a lot of times where it just comes a little bit here and a little bit there, but there's often this unshakable sense of condemnation that just won't go away. It haunts us and it taunts us and it wants us to believe that there's simply no way that God could look upon us and fully approve of us. But let me tell you why we think that way. me tell you why we think that way. Let me tell you why you're not living in the fullness of joy, fullness of peace, fullness of satisfaction in your relationship with God that you desperately want, whether you feel like you have the energy for it or not. The reason is because you and I often fail to believe what God himself says he has done with our sin. We fail to believe it. And so what we tend to focus on and what tends to consume our minds is not what he has said he's done with our sin, but what we have done in our sinning. We focus on that. That's what consumes us. And so we have this incredible story here in John chapter 8 that actually powerfully illustrates and addresses this exact problem. What we see in John chapter 8 in the person of Jesus is that he has the power to humble and transform hypocrites. Those who deal with that voice of condemnation by putting other people down and trying to make themselves feel better than others. But it also, he has the power to liberate and transform those who are beaten down. Those who are dealing with that voice of condemnation in their head by just beating themselves up. Right? And so this story that we have here, it begins with Jesus in the temple, then he goes up to the Mount of Olives, and now he comes back to the temple. According to this passage, he comes down and he's teaching there in the temple. And as he's teaching, there is a woman that is brought before him. It's a story, a moment of really high drama, and in many ways, it's one of the most dramatic passages that you will read in the Bible. And it actually has a line in it that has become just a part of our cultural sayings. It's that popular. So read this with me, beginning in verse 1. It says, "They went each to his own house, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, 'Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women, so what do you say?' This they said to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, 'Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her.' And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, 'Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?' She said, 'No one, Lord.' And Jesus says, 'Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, sin no more.' Sin no more." If you have your Bibles with you, some of you may notice all sorts of little brackets and footnotes and that sort of thing in this passage. I don't want to bore you with the details of textual criticism, but I want you to know why we're considering this story as relevant for our lives today and not just skipping over it for a moment here. The reason is simply this: there is almost complete consensus among biblical scholars that this section was not written by the gospel writer John, okay? In the earliest manuscripts that we have, and I would emphasize that we actually have, the earliest Greek manuscripts that we've unearthed of the Gospel of John, this passage is not found in those earliest manuscripts. But although that's all true, there is complete unanimity that this story is a first-hand eyewitness account. It was told early on in the church, it was passed on amongst people, and it appears in all these different places. It'll often, sometimes in some manuscripts it appears in Luke, sometimes it appears at the very end of John, oftentimes it'll appear right here in the later manuscripts. Right? And so we're not really sure who wrote this, but we know and have confidence that it's an eyewitness account. And there'll be some reasons that I'll explain a little bit as we go further into this. But I just thought I'd maybe tell you how R.C. Sproul put it. I thought that'd be helpful for you. R.C. Sproul put it like this: "The overwhelming consensus of textual critics is that this was not a part of the original Gospel of John, at least not in this portion of John. At the same time, The overwhelming consensus is that this account is authentic, it's apostolic, and it should be contained in any edition of the New Testament. That's why it's in your English Bible. That's why it's there and not in the footnote section. Continuing the quote here, I believe it's nothing less than the Word of God, whether it belongs here in John's Gospel or at the end of chapter 21 or somewhere else in Luke, I leave that for the ages. Right? So you could agree with him or not, but I also think we can take great comfort in just knowing that if you read this story and apply it to your life, which Christians have done for centuries and centuries and centuries, you're not learning something that's going to change your theology about God or how to live in this world. There's nothing happening here that you would go, oh man, that changes everything about this. No, it actually is a wonderful illustration of how the Christian life functions in light of the gospel. And so that's why I think it's really worthy of our interest this morning. And so I wrote one sentence for you. It's a run-on sentence, but this sentence I'm going to give to you as we move through this story and consider again how we deal with this voice of self-condemnation in our heads. The first is for the people who just want to beat themselves up. So this number one goes like this: for all of those here this morning, who are embarrassed and caught in their sin. For all of those embarrassed this morning and caught in their sin, look with me at the beginning of this story. We're told in verses 3 through 4 that there is a woman who was caught in the act of adultery. We are told twice that she was caught. Right? We're told that she's caught in this act, that somebody stumbled in and caught her in bed with somebody else who was not her husband. Now, I don't want you to miss this. I want you to imagine the embarrassment of that. Imagine the embarrassment of that. Just the sudden covering up, the sheer horror. And then furthermore, she's dragged and brought before Jesus in the temple, which we remember, Jesus is a very famous preacher. People are like constantly wanting to listen to him teach, which is what he's doing here. So he's teaching at the temple in a very public place of worship, and this woman is drugged before this massive crowd. This is actually, I think, a helpful picture for all of us. At least for what is true of our lives today, and ultimately what you and I will experience as true in our lives one day when we actually stand before Jesus, the Son of God. Right? This woman has all of her sin, once hidden, now exposed before everybody, in particular the eyes of Jesus. The Bible teaches us this about our own lives. In Luke chapter 12, it says that whatever you've heard in the dark will be heard in the light. That whatever you've whispered in secret will one day be proclaimed on the tops of roofs. Right? The concept is there are things that you and I would say to one person and not want anybody else to hear, but one day all that we've ever said, all that we've ever done, all those hidden secrets, it'll be as public as if someone got up with a megaphone on top of our church building today and announced it to the city of Redlands. It's a powerful image. Right? So even if you're someone who's really quick thinking, if you're clever, right, if you're socially agile and kind of manipulate others, you cannot keep anything hidden from God. And there will come a time, even if you've done a great job of keeping that hidden from other people, that your secrets will be revealed. Right? And so this is this picture of this woman, which is a picture of our lives. She's rushed into this judgment place right before the eyes of the Son of God himself. But not only that, she's been caught in the act, and now she's completely lonely. I mean, can you just see her surrounded by all of these people, essentially just pointing their finger at her direction, just like, this woman, look at what happened to her. There's a crowd of people watching who are there to hear Jesus teach, and suddenly, in this public place, it'd be like somebody dragging in someone caught in the act of adultery in a church setting even like this. Could you imagine the horror and embarrassment of that? Picture her. Disheveled. And in verse 6, even though this is the scene, we are told that these scribes and Pharisees, they asked Jesus a question. What's the question? Jesus, verse 5, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? This is the tension in the story. What is Jesus going to say? Right? They are setting, in their minds, a trap. We're told at the beginning of verse 6, they said this to test him. They're trying to trap Jesus so that they can do away with him. Right? This has been going on throughout John's gospel. And so what's the trap? Right? I mean, we can clearly see this as a trap. I mean, just for one, consider that we know it's a trap. I mean, where's the man? Right? Where's the guy? I mean, if they're really concerned about justice, as the Jewish law insisted, the man was equally guilty in Jewish law. And if they'd been caught in the act, presumably, they would know who the man was, wouldn't they? But you see, these so-called janitors of the law are not really interested in cleaning up Jerusalem. All they've set out to do is corner Jesus, and to them, who cares if this woman's life gets lost in the process? We achieved our goal. They don't care about immorality. They want to bring Jesus down. So they brutally drag her in front of Jesus. They set the trap. In verse 5, what will Jesus say about her? And they pose this question as a test. How in the world is this a test? I mean, we can't really see it on the face of it. Like, how is this putting Jesus in a corner? Well, it puts him in a corner in this way. Because this region of the world is ruled by Rome. And so, Rome was the only people who could decide who would be executed, how capital punishment will be exercised. And so they're putting Jesus in a spot that if he were to follow the letter of the law, that they are hoping he will do, then he will say, let's execute her, but then he's now all in trouble with the Roman emperor, with the Roman government, right? That's not going to fly. He's going to be in big trouble. They will do away with him, right? But secondly, if he doesn't want to get in that trouble and he says, well, he denies the law of Moses, which teaches this, then they're going to say, this can't be the Messiah. He doesn't uphold the Mosaic law, right? Which we receive from God through our father Moses. And so do you see the dilemma? What's he going to say? If he says execute her, then he's in trouble with the Romans. If he says don't worry about it, he can't be the Messiah. This is the dilemma. They're trying to embarrass Jesus, and so they do so by embarrassing and catching this woman in her sin. Do you resonate at all with this? This idea of embarrassment? In 1897, there was a magazine in London called Tidbits. And in that magazine, in September 1897, there's a story that's been attributed to Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. And in this magazine, it tells of Arthur Conan Doyle, who had a friend who had continually told him that every single person has a skeleton in their closet, no matter how respectable that person is. Just this belief that no matter how respectable you appear to other people, everyone has a skeleton in their closet that they keep hidden. And so Arthur Conan Doyle wanted to test this famously, and so he chose a subject for his test to see if this was true. And he, in his experiment, chose a well-respected archdeacon of the church. An archdeacon of the church in England who it was said against him that not even the worst critics had ever breathed a word of disrespect against them. Right? This person was like, wow, that person's so respectable. And so he went down to the nearest post office and he wrote a telegram to this archdeacon, and the telegram simply said, all is discovered, flee at once. That was it. Didn't say what he knew, just assumed there was a skeleton in this guy's closet, see if it's true. All is discovered, flee at once. And the archdeacon disappeared and had never been heard of since, right? As the story goes. Do you relate to that? If you got a message today I know what you did. I know what you said. No context, just that's all you know. What would you do? You relate to that? Embarrassment from being found out? Caught in sin. Have you ever been caught? Have you ever been caught? I have. You ever been caught? What is it that you hope in your life no one discovers? That you hope somehow you could take it to your grave. Isn't this like most people's greatest fear? Like really being exposed? Being known? And granted, I know not everyone has done something so bad and embarrassing in this room that it would cause you to leave Redlands and never come back. Like, I get that. Some of you, maybe. But everyone has done things in life that would make them squirm in their chair or blush. It make them go, I'd really like to get out of here right now. You know? Whatever it is, the reason I'm bringing this up is not to embarrass you right now. I'm not trying to make your life miserable. I'm trying to help you. Because whatever that thing is, that's the thing that's giving cause to that voice rising in your head, saying, man, no one would approve of you if they really knew you. No one would love you if they knew that. Right? That is what's breathing life into your self-condemnation. So how is this woman going to deal with this? I mean, she's lit up for the entire world to see. Well, we'll get to her in a second, but not before Jesus deals with the second group in this room and in this story. And that is those who want to put other people down so that they can feel justified. And so for not only all those who are embarrassed and caught in their sin, but secondly, for all those humbled in their hypocrisy. For all those humbled in their hypocrisy, consider the middle of this story, which is the most famous part of this story. Jesus bends down, midway through verse 6, he bends down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continue to ask him what? What do you say, Jesus, verse 5? They're berating him, essentially, is the picture. He's writing on the ground, and they're continually saying, what do you say, Jesus? What are you going to say? You can't get out of this one, Jesus. That sort of thing. As they continued to ask him, he stood up. And he said to them, let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more, he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. They berate him. Don't miss the theater of this. As he bends down, picture him writing with his finger in the ground. He straightens up, stands up, maybe looks him in the eyes. And then he says some of those well-known words in the Bible. Right, these are words quoted by Christians, quoted by religious people. These are words quoted by atheists in our society. If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw the stone. And then theatrically, he kneels down again and he writes in the dirt. What a scene. And somehow, in there, they begin to drop their stones and walk away. I know a lot of you are going to ask me, well, what was he writing in the ground, right? What's he scribbling in the ground? And the answer is nobody knows. Nobody knows, right? If anybody says they know, don't listen to them. They don't know, because nobody knows. They're lying to you, right? There's a lot of interesting ideas that are kind of, oh, that's fun, to think about and that sort of thing, but no one actually knows. But I actually think it's a really important note about the story, that it says this. I want to read you an interesting quote. It's from a historian of ancient literature who wrote this. They said, as a literary historian, I am perfectly convinced that whatever the Gospels are, they are not legends. They're true stories. They're not artistic enough. They don't work up to things. Look at this story about Jesus scribbling in the dust with the woman caught in adultery. Nothing comes of the scribbling. it adds nothing to the story. And the art of inventing little irrelevant details to make an imaginary scene more convincing is purely a modern art. Meaning, back in ancient literature, they didn't just include random details about stories unless it was for a purpose that was leading you somewhere. We do that today. They didn't do that back then. And so this person says, surely the only explanation of this passage of why it says Jesus wrote in the dirt is that the thing really happened. Right? The author put it simply because he had seen it. There's no other reason for it to be there. Just so that you and I know this happened. It was an eyewitness account. So if you're like, what did he write in the dirt? I would say, I don't know, but it tells you that it happened. It tells you the story happened. Right? The reason it's there is because somebody wrote this down because they saw it. Okay? So back to the actual content. They're trying to trap Jesus, and what he says to them is genius. He gets up. He never actually says a stone shouldn't be thrown, does he? He says, throw a stone. Go for it. But make sure the one who does is qualified. Right? What he's doing, it's brilliant. He's flipping it back on them. They're trying to trap him, right? And now he's questioning their credentials for being qualified to be the executioners. Because in the Old Testament law, which is what they seem to care about, Jesus knows that in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 7, the eyewitnesses of the act of adultery have to be the first people to throw the stone. So if you've seen it, you're the eyewitness, you'd be the first to throw a stone, and then other people would follow suit. And so Jesus then says, very well, if you caught her, you throw first. Right? If anyone is without sin, if you're qualified, you throw. What's he saying? Well, he's not saying what a lot of people have thought. He's not saying only a sinless person could ever bring punishment or justice. That's ridiculous. There would never be justice. We'd have chaos in societies or something like that, right? What he's saying is, I know you, and I know the law of Moses. And the very law of Moses that you say you follow, you are breaking. Yes, you can invoke the Mosaic law in this situation, but what about the law of conspiracy that you seem to be breaking? What about the law in the Old Testament against impartiality of justice? Where's the man? If you really care about justice, where is he? Right? Or maybe you seem to care so much about sexual sin. How about your sexual integrity? How are you doing in the law? Right? He just flips it on them and essentially says, I don't deny the law of Moses, but by the law of Moses, I deny that you're qualified to not only be witnesses, but be executioners. Do you see this? If you don't name your sin, Jesus will name it for you. You could be a hypocrite and not want to name your sin and want to hide behind certain things, but Jesus will name it for you. And so they test Jesus, and he brilliantly says, I'm not going to execute her. I'm not going to get in trouble with the Romans, and I will uphold the Mosaic law, and if I do that, then you go first. Right, this is how hypocrisy works, right? When we are unqualified to judge someone else because we are just as guilty in our own sin. I don't know if you guys remember this story that took place about 4 years ago up in Beaverton, Oregon. There was a woman named Crystal Leary who drove a silver Honda Pilot. And she drove that Pilot to a store one day, and she left her 4-year-old son in the back of the car and left the car running as she ran in to grab a few items. But as she ran into the store to grab a few items, a person came along, a car thief, and stole her car. And he got a little ways away from the store, and as he got a little ways away, he realized there is a baby in the back seat of this car. So he turned around, drove the car back to the store, which the mother was waiting. He demanded that she takes her child out of the car and then proceeded to lecture her about how bad of a mom she was and threatened to call the police on her. She took the child, and he drove away with the car, right? Isn't that amazing? It's nuts. You can go look it up. Have fun today looking that story up, right? Right? Isn't that crazy? We can all see it, can't we, from our vantage point? That guy's crazy. That's like hypocrisy, isn't it? He's doing that. What's scary is that he couldn't see it. That he really thought, I'm going to lecture this person on how to be a good mom. He couldn't see it. Hypocrisy blinds you. These scribes and Pharisees think they're being so righteous. They think even executing this woman, putting her in this trap, in order to trap the Son of God and do away with him, they think that's righteousness. They're so blind, right? They try to trap Jesus, but instead they drop their rocks, humbled in their hypocrisy, because Jesus said one sentence to them. Have you ever been humbled in your hypocrisy before? Maybe you didn't steal a car and lecture the mom who left their baby in the car. I hope not. But maybe you're a really hard worker, and so you use that as fuel to make yourself feel better than people that you view as lazy. Or maybe you have a lot of self-control and sexual integrity, and so you use that to say, well, I'm not like those people. Or maybe you're really vulnerable. You're an honest person about your sin, and so you share pretty openly about your life, and so you use that to feel better about yourself because you look at other people who aren't as transparent as you, and you go, well, I'm better than they are. I'm more of a Christian than they are. Or maybe you're really faithful at reading your Bible and sharing the gospel. You share it every single week. You read your Bible every single day, and that makes you feel better than others who just simply sin differently than you do. Right? You're using things in your life that you feel like you're good at, and you look at your sin, your weaknesses, your flaws, you go, don't pay attention to that. I'm better than you in this way. And all I'm doing is trying to quiet that voice in my head that says God wouldn't love you if he really stood before him. I just wonder this morning what spaces in your life you might be humbled in your hypocrisy if you were to stand before Jesus and hear his voice this morning. Maybe you're not the I'm embarrassed and caught in my sin person. You're the I'm pretty good and others are pretty bad sort of flavor of a Christian. One commentator said, with this lone statement of Jesus, whoever was without sin, you throw first. He said, with that statement, Jesus sent the hypocrite's mind home to their private lives. Could I do that with you now? Send your mind home to your private life. It's amazing. It's brilliant. He challenges them, not by condemning them. He challenges them with the way of compassion. Why you really think you're better than other people? This is how he deals with hypocrisy. It's brilliant, isn't it? With compassion. And so now we can put it together finally. Whether you're in number one or number two, whether you're here this morning and you're the one embarrassed by being caught in your sin, or you're the one who is being humbled by your hypocrisy, for all those humbled in their hypocrisy, for all those embarrassed and caught in their sin, number three, the point of the story, behold the wonder and power of the gospel. Jesus stood up and said to her the sweetest words that any human being could ever hear from his lips. Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? Now her only words in the whole story appear, no one. Lord. She calls him Lord. But the tension in the story is still there. What will Jesus say to her? What's he going to say? That was the tension in verse 5, right? What's he going to say? And he's without sin, right? He opened his mouth and he spoke. And what did his voice speak right into her ear? In the midst of her embarrassment, in the moment of her most public of shame, neither do I condemn you. Man, if that does not light up your heart with joy, I don't think you have any switches. I mean, if that doesn't light you up, there might not be an outlet in your heart, right? That moment, neither do I condemn you. Do you remember in chapter 3 how Jesus told Nicodemus, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life." And then he continued, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him." Be saved through him. Here we have a vivid picture of those words from John chapter 3. This is why he came. It's too wonderful to truly comprehend if you can see it. And if you can see it, if you can hear those words in your ear that would land into the soil of your heart, it'll dramatically change your life. I've told you this story before, or at least some of you at least, but I once met a man who's Somali who became a Christian because of this story. If you don't know, Somalis are next to North Korea, the people group in this world that if you convert from Islam to Christianity, you will be killed by your family for doing that. And this man opened his Bible one day that someone kept putting in his glove box, and he finally got annoyed by it, so he finally said, "Fine, I'll open it up." And he opened it up, and it opened up to John chapter 8. And he started reading this story that we're looking at this morning. And as he started reading it, he goes, "Man, I've heard this story before," because it's a story that's passed around Islamic oral tradition. And so he was familiar with the story, so he goes, "Oh, this story I've heard before, I can trust this." So he kept reading. But what's interesting to him is that in the story that they pass around in Islamic tradition, when it gets to the point of this scene right here where she says, "Where are they?" And she says, "I don't see him," Jesus picks up a stone and he throws it at her first. And then the rest pile on, and she dies. And so he gets to these words, "Neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more," and his jaw hits the floor. That's not what I've heard. And he kept reading, and he gets down later in John chapter 8 where Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am," which Abraham is like Muslims, like, that's our guy, right? And when Jesus spoke those words, "Before Abraham was, I am," the guy believed. It was a miracle. He believed. This word right here this morning, "Neither do I condemn you," that's a word that if you could hear it, it'll dramatically transform your life, just like it transformed this life. But then look at how it transforms your life, because what does Jesus say? Not only do I not condemn you, but now go and sin no more. The order is so important, because most of us would think it would read, "Go and sin no more," and then once you've done a good enough job for a while, come back to me, and if you've done a good job, then I won't condemn you. But it doesn't say that. It says, "Go and sin no more." The announcement over this woman's life is there. It's true for her just to believe. But then the commission follows it. Go and sin no more. Leave your sin behind. Walk in newness of life. The order is, now that you know I don't condemn you, now go and sin no more. This is the message of Christianity. And this is our problem. Because we still believe that if we reverse the order, somehow I'm going to be more free from my sin. Somehow, if I could just do a better job, if I could just beat myself up, if I could just be better than those people over there, then the condemnation voice will go away. And so those thoughts of what we've done in our sinning consume us, and therefore you are still enslaved in your sin. But if what consumed you was what Jesus announces over you and the truth that he doesn't dismiss your sin, he doesn't say, I don't condemn you. No, the truth is he's been sent into the world not to condemn you, but to go to the cross so that he would hang there and be condemned in your place. That is how he saves you. This is how it works. And what consumes you then, you will live out. True story, in 1999, a 4-year-old girl in Wales, England, had her skin start turning an orange color. And they couldn't figure out why. They were like, oh, she seems to be fine. There's no illness here. They took her to all these doctors. Finally, they took her to a local hospital, and the doctor figured out what was wrong with her. He figured out that she was intaking a massive amount of beta-carotene. Beta-carotene was an additive found in a very, very popular kids' drink at the time called Sunny Delight. And this girl was drinking liters of it every single day. I only dreamt of being able to drink liters of it every single day, but it was a treat, for me, But this girl was drinking so much Sunny Delight. She was consuming so much Sunny Delight that her skin was turning orange. Right? You will become what you consume. The thoughts that dominate your life, the belief that you have, the things that you hold on to, it will either lead you into freedom, go and sin no more, or it'll continue to leave you enslaved. We get the order wrong, and we think that if we do, we will become free, but it's just not true. Some of you aren't free because you're trying to justify yourself by putting others down. And as long as you keep feeling better than other people, you will never be free. You will never be free. I'm telling you the truth. And some of you aren't free because you think beating yourself up will finally work one day. And it's not the truth. It's only hearing the voice of Jesus say, I do not condemn you, now go and sin no more. Is this how you see Jesus when you're embarrassed in your sin? Is this how you hear Jesus as you put other people down? Behold the wonder and power of the gospel.